Welcome to the First Customers Podcast. Today we have Sean Brandenburg, the CEO of Central Cargo North America. Now, his company's only been in existence for a year and a half, and within the first 4 months, they'd already hit $1 million in revenue. So they're killing it on the sales side. Sean, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paris. Pleasure to be here. I'm enjoying the show quite a bit. So,
awesome!
Glad to be
That's
here.
Great to hear. Let's start off by learning a little more about your background. Where'd you grow up?
Well, Dad was in the Army, so spent a lot of time moving around quite a bit. Born in just outside of Cincinnati in Ohio. Within the first few years, we had already moved to Arizona, New Jersey, Germany. When he got out of the military, then we moved to a little town called Demopolis, Alabama, where we spent, most of the elementary school years and ultimately in middle school era and high school, moved back to Cincinnati, a little town called Fairfield, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati there. Go Bengals.
There you go. When you were a kid, did you have any like fundraiser type experiences or like selling lemonade or any of that kind of sales experience growing up?
Well, for me, and I think, listening to a lot of other people that you've had on your show, it's sort of a very similar experience. I started a paper route when I was 13, and actually ended up staying with that until, I was able to drive and then get out and go get a job at a grocery store and then did the same thing as everybody else, worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken or at grocery stores or did all those little jobs while you're trying to make some money as a teenager growing up, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. So that's kind of your childhood to teenage years. What did you do college age during that period of your life?
Well, I went into the Air Force shortly after high school, just simply because of the fact I really didn't know where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to fly. I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. So I had some scholarships. I decided not to take the scholarships and go straight into the Air Force and then kind of work my way through school while I figured out what it was that I wanted to be. I thought that might be a faster path to get me to where I wanted. And speaking of first customers and selling, I had a recruiter that did a wonderful sales job on me because he told me that, I could get a high-tech career in logistics, by working on computers. Well, what I didn't know what that he meant was that I would be sitting here doing this all day long and typing, typing on a computer and not actually, doing logistics or working on computers or doing something else a little high tech, right? But
yeah,
so he did a pretty good sales job on me, and then so anyway, went into logistics. First got stationed in Holland. Started working my way through school while I was there. They have these University of Maryland global campuses that they have on the military bases.
right.
Was transferred back on a permanent change of station from Holland to Oklahoma, where I spent some time. Ended up getting a scholarship from the Air Force to go back to school full time, which was a pilot scholarship. So I went back to school, University of Maryland or University of Miami of Ohio. While doing that, and had to work part time just to kind of help make some money, and so ended up running a clothing store, a men's clothing store. Back in the day, it was a store called Oak Tree. So, actually ended up having quite a bit of sales experience doing that because you get commission on all the customers that come through, and you're kind of helping them match a tie and with a suit that they're buying or something like that. So I think I think one of the big experiences that I gained from doing that was really always to sort of biggie size the sale, right? Because if somebody was buying pants, I'd show them a shirt. If they were buying a suit, I'd show them a tie, or I'd show them some shoes, or and so I was always increasing my commissions by selling these people more and more and more. And so as they were there, then I ended up building a good loyal customer base also, because they kept coming back and they would ask specifically for me because they knew if they wanted to buy something, I'd help them kind of fill out that wardrobe or fill out that outfit, right? So and it really that kind of goes back even to paper route days, because when you're going out, and one of the things I learned really early on in having a paper route was, I would go to collect money for the papers that would be delivered, and I'd realize, well, those guys that I put their paper on their porch were giving me some tips. Whereas if I missed it and I put it in the bush, then, I didn't get any tips. So, I
Okay.
learned really quick that, just put the paper on the porch, and then, nobody has to go very far to get it, and I'd make some extra money. So, that was one of those things I think that I learned from, that first experience, doing a paper route, and then even moving on into doing, sort of a sales and a management role at a clothing store was the same thing. It's, find something that your customer really wants, and then make sure that you're providing it,
Yeah.
and one of your previous guests used this term called user experience, right? Which I absolutely loved, and I think that really applies into those situations, right? Because it's that user experience that I figured out really quick is, okay, what's going to make them happy with what I'm doing? I give them a good user experience. They don't have to walk out the door very far. They don't have to get in the snow. They can,
Right.
get their paper. They can come in and they have a good experience with me because I help them pick out some clothes, or I help them, get something that they really want, even though they don't know that they really want it, right?
Right. All right. So you had the clothing experience, and then at what point did you start getting into kind of starting your own business or being a part of a business?
Well, I mean that went on down the road. I mean, and before all of that time, I mean, I waited tables, right,
Hmm.
and I was a DJ at some point in time. I
Okay.
always had, for the longest period of time, no matter what I was doing, I worked two or three jobs at a time, just because I was hungry and I liked money, and and just trying to make ends meet and do what you've got to do, and so I think that going through those experiences again, it was sort of the same thing, learning, what does somebody want out of me, and how do I go back in and provide that to them. And when I got out of the military and I came into the logistics business, the freight forwarding business, full time, um, I was always sort of doing sales, because it was, again, for me, it was that user experience. If somebody was working with me and I was facilitating a shipment for them, going from Cincinnati to Amsterdam, I wanted to make sure that that they got everything that they needed before they even asked for it. So I was, trying to make sure that I was providing the service to them, and so that I could build on that business. And ultimately, when I moved into a sales role in this industry, it wasn't really because I was out enjoying or wanting to be a salesperson. It was just because I figured out, you know what? I'm already doing sales every day, right? Because I'm talking to these customers, and I'm giving them this great experience, and I'm gaining more business. So a sales call is just a conversation, and so I learned that very quickly, that it wasn't that I needed to be a hard salesman. And by the way, I sold cars for a while too, back in the mid 90s, when it was very high pressure sales, and so that was one of the things I realized that I never really wanted to do again, was I didn't want to do that high pressure sales.
Okay.
um, so I always had this sort of customer following when I went from one location to the next. When I got into this industry, and it was with a company in Cincinnati. A couple years later, they wanted somebody to take over a branch in Nashville, so I relocated to Nashville, and then it was my responsibility to grow it. And again, it was a matter of having conversations. We would get opportunities that would come up. Back then, internet was there, but it was, very hard to get information, not like it is today, right? You didn't do a lot of sourcing by doing a lot of research over the internet. You picked up a phone book, you went through the yellow pages, and you looked for people that looked like they were manufacturers, and then you called them. You had a conversation with them, or you might have mailed them something, and then you'd call them back in a few weeks later, right? So,
You were just cold calling to get leads. You weren't
yeah,
the
you
way to buy
know,
leads back then as much.
Well, couldn't really buy leads back then. I mean, we had these things called phone ticklers. You could buy directories of manufacturers, throughout the
Hmm.
country. So you would do those, or But I always found that, even just the yellow pages were effective because you could run down and you could see whether somebody was an insurance company or somebody was manufacturing something. Right.
Right, because the
So,
yellow pages are all categorized by business
right.
type. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think it was a matter of just being hungry, right? And wanted to go out and build more business and build, and make the company money, make myself money. Um, Ultimately, I ended up relocating to Dallas again, and then found my way back to Cincinnati a few years after that, and then ended up being in a sort of a sales and a general manager role. And 4 years later, I had the opportunity to start my first company. So my dad and I went into business together, and we started a freight forwarding operation. And the great thing about it, what was really easy about all of that was because all of these customers that I had started with in Cincinnati, when I moved to Nashville, they continued to use me there. And then when I went to Dallas, they were using me there. And then when we went back, so we had already a good base of business and I had a good following of business, right? So when we first
Yeah.
opened the company, we were able to, I think our first year back then, first full year, we did about $3 million, right? So, and that was 2002. Um, so, we had a good start, and then it was just a matter of going out and trying to develop more business beyond that.
So when you say that the customers followed you, from different places you were in, does that mean like you were working for a different business, doing sales and things, and just the relationships you built doing sales for other companies, you just tapped into those same relationships when you started your own company?
Well, it was those same customers again because we had built such good relationships with them, and also because again I think it really goes down to again that user experience because they knew that if they had something they had to go to Sri Lanka, they could call Sean and Sean would take care of it. If they needed something to go to Colombia, they could call Sean and Sean would take care of it.
So
And
it didn't matter
so
which company you worked for at the time. They just trusted you as a person at that point.
exactly, or exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so it was really about trust, and of course, when you're going through and you're trying to build your base, right? You want to make sure that you can try to rely on some of those relationships that you have built over time, and you go back and you make the phone calls and you say, hey, here's what I'm wanting to do, and are you would you be interested, in working with us? And without a doubt, the majority of those people that I had the conversations with, it was always a resounding yes. We trust you, and so you start with that good base, and then you sort of build on that, right? And you continue to grow your business, and at least it gives you a starting point, and then you just have to go back and capitalize on those opportunities. And in our business, at least, one of the things that we would do is look at the lanes that we were moving business for on a regular basis, and then we'd say, okay, well, who else can we find that moves business from Cincinnati to the UK, right? Because I have a lot of that business already. And if I can go back and bring some more customers on, then that'll fall right into what we're already doing. And it allowed us to tap into some trade lanes, into some route developments, and really target specific business for those lanes more than just trying to target a specific customer just because they had a big name like GE. So that was how we started growing. We had a lot of business that was importing from China back in, again, that was 2002. And, we were doing just a lot of business out of China. And one of the companies that we got associated with early on was very Eurocentric. And so, we started helping that company to do a lot more business out of China as well.
Okay. Let's pause here for just a second. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on your mic. If you
Okay.
could just pull the cord out
Yeah.
away from you just a little bit. I think it was scrubbing your suit.
Yeah. Might have been my shirt.
I think the mic part of it, yeah, was scrubbing a little.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, if you would just take a second to explain a little bit about how your business works. For anybody who might not know what freight forwarding means or how that business works, give us just a little overview of that.
Sure. Basically, we are a facilitator, right? What we do is we facilitate the movement of goods from internationally or domestically from point A to point B. So, for example, if you want to buy that hat is coming from somewhere, right? So that hat is more than likely going to be manufactured in somewhere like China, Vietnam, could be India. It's going to be imported into the U.S. It's ultimately going to be distributed to a store where then you then went and purchased that. Well, the manufacturer of that hat would reach out to somebody like us. Why? Because what we do is we take care of the customs regulations and getting it out of the country where it originates from. We contract with the ocean lines, and everybody right now is probably thinking about all those ships that were stuck outside the port not that long
Right.
ago, and so being in our business, we would be somebody that would contract and have thousands of containers on that vessel. So, we're working as hard as anybody else also to trying to make sure that those containers are getting released, that they're getting cleared through customs, that they're getting unloaded and delivered to the final distribution point, and then ultimately to the final end user, you.
Now,
So
you
we
don't
have
own
to
the
we have to
container.
know both the regulations for customs in other countries as well as know the regulations here, in the U.S. U.S. customs. You've got to know sometimes FDA rules. You've got to know USDA rules. We deal with TSA. We deal with FAA. We deal with FMC. So if there is a regulatory agency out there that wants to get their hands in somebody's pocket, we're the perfect candidate because companies like ours, we have to deal with each and every one of them constantly. So
But you don't own the actual containers, right?
no.
You're you're just representing and making sure that they get where they need to get.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it in terms of, you see all the trucks on the road, right? So
Right.
many of the truckload companies that you might see rolling down the road, they're asset-based carriers. They own that equipment. What we do, even if we're doing it domestically, is we say, okay, well, I have a contract with that carrier, and I've got a contract with 15 other carriers. So what you do is you come to me, and then we'll go back out and we'll look and see if we can get you the best price on one of those 15. And that way you're not necessarily stuck into a contract agreement with one of those. Now, sometimes that may benefit you depending upon your volume, and sometimes it may not. So, it's easy to think of us as sort of a travel agent for cargo, right?
Hmm.
That's sort of how we go back in and we make things happen.
Okay. So the first business that you opened with your father, that one did well. How did that story end? How did that business end up doing?
We we had opened a company, and then there was another company that had a lot of franchises. Let's say they were independent contracted offices, but the best way to think of them was franchises. So we ended up joining forces with them, and we became at that time one of 22 in the U.S. And so, while we had our own local company, we flew the banner of another company that was headquartered in Seattle. Um, so when we worked with them, well, the benefit that we had with doing that was we were able to ride on the additional volumes that company had. So instead of just us having $5 million worth of business, we could go along with a company that $100 million worth of business, and we could get better buying power because
Okay.
there was bigger volumes, right? So when that went through a few years, one of the opportunities, because we were sort of leading the charge into areas that a lot of the other branches weren't really, or the other locations weren't, such as the imports out of China or imports out of Brazil. We were leading the charge into some of those lanes. So the corporation had decided to end up buying dad out of the business, and then became my partner in Cincinnati. And then a few years after that, they ended up recruiting me to move to the headquarters in Seattle, and then come and help the company grow further. And I think specifically because a lot of what we were doing, we were always, again, I think ahead of everybody else in looking at new lanes, looking at new opportunities, trying to get into markets where there wasn't a big push at that moment, because we saw that there was a good availability of opportunities there, and ways for us to make more business, make more money.
So what was your role when they recruited you to the headquarters?
I then became the executive director of international development. So that meant that not only did I have to deal with the trade lane management, a lot of my responsibility was dealing with, our international partners and, convincing them to work with us if they didn't already work with us. So let's say a company in Germany, if they had a good volume of business into or out of the US and we wanted them to be our partner in Germany, then we would go over and we'd have conversations with them and we would convince them why we were a good partner for them as well. And then ultimately adding their volumes to our volumes, we all benefited from that. Beyond that, then there was a lot of training and going out and doing sales training in the offices. There was a lot of doing training and bringing on new branches. So if there was an opportunity for us to open a new location in Phoenix, then a lot of time I was very engaged in that by meeting with the people in Phoenix and convincing them why it was a good decision. And a lot of that was based on my experience of having been one of the branch owners or one of the franchisees. So I could talk to them from the experience of having been there.
Could you give a little more context and perspective on kind of the size of the clients that you guys would work with? Was it like brands that people would recognize possibly, or like who are shipping things around? And
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know that I want to share my
okay,
customers out with
right,
with any or my competitors that might be listening. But I mean, we do anything from furniture. We do a lot of furniture right now.
okay,
We do. I mean, we could do tennis shoes, again, clothing. We do a lot of clothing. When we started this particular business in 2019, I had left the previous company during COVID, so there was a change in some of the management, and so I had the opportunity to leave, and when I did, there was good friends that I had known and worked with for a very long period of time in Italy. And so, when I said, "Hey, who else are you guys working with?" Because I'm looking for a new opportunity, and I'd like to reach out to them. And one of the things they said was, "Look, we want to open in the U.S., so why don't we partner together, and then we can expand our operation into North America?" So Central Cargo Italy has 11 offices throughout Italy. Been open now for 12 years. So when we opened here in the U.S., they became my partners, so my business partners. So when we
gotcha,
first started and first opened, a lot of that business that we had as a core was imports and or exports that were primarily Italian based or Italian focused, and that might again have been furniture. It might have been clothing.
gotcha,
We went through and then expanded on that through partnerships that we've had and relationships that we've had with, let's say, people in the UK or people in China. Also, and then bringing a lot of the customers on, and again, furniture has just become a big business for us. I think sometimes you get into a certain, let's say, vertical, and it just seems to grow, right? Because you're doing so well at it. Right now, we do a lot of aircraft parts. So we're shipping engines all over the world. We're shipping other parts. We're shipping automotive parts. Pharmaceuticals. Um, you name it. If it
yeah,
needs to be moved, then we have our hands in it. Funny enough, we just recently had in our warehouse last week we exported about 20 pallets of pasta to Italy. So, which was odd enough, right? So I went out and I saw it. I'm like, well, what in the world do we got going on here? Turned out it's pasta going to Italy, right? So,
that's funny. I guess our agriculture is still pretty strong here.
yeah, I mean, we do seeds, watermelon seeds, lettuce seeds. You have a lot of that type of business that's being sold because of farming. And that brings its own challenges because now you've got USDA that's involved, and you've got other certifications that have to be done because it's a produce seed, right? Anytime that you're moving foodstuffs, there's certifications that have
Right.
to be done. You know.
So the last guy that I talked to, they were in manufacturing, and they had a perspective on the supply chain from kind of a manufacturer and a shipper's perspective. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective on what's happened, the past few years, and kind of give us an idea of what you've seen or where you think things are at now compared to where they were maybe at the worst of it in 2020 when everything was locked down. But what's that been like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because when we opened in 2021, it was still the height of the mess of the logistics and the supply
Right.
chain crisis. We had shipments that we started moving that were stuck just like everybody else. The prices for containers were $20,000 plus. Um, and it's interesting the fact that we grew and we grew as fast as we did despite the crisis. But I think one of the approaches we took to the problem was it was just being honest with people and telling them what was going on and trying to be again as upfront about the problems and say, here's what's going to happen, here's how we can try to get around it, how do you want to do it, and we would bring people into the conversation. What we've seen now in just the last year and a half since that time, even is a reduction in rates on the Trans-Pacific that have reduced by more than half. Again, where you might have paid $20,000 for a container at that time, those rates are now below 10.
And what was the
And
normal before then?
no, before then, I mean, depending upon the lane where you're going, but let's just talk port to port. Let's say from Shanghai to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Rates would go anywhere from a couple $1,000s, at different periods of time during the year. Peak season, you might have a little bit more, you might have a little bit lower. But that was about what you'd see. And getting, from let's say Shanghai into a place like Dallas, you might add on another $800-900, or maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending upon the year. Um, Fuel surcharges have a lot to do with that. But the prices had increased 5 times, and in some cases even worse, because you ended up with a place like Chicago. You might have a rate that's going 22, 23, 24, $25,000.
Whoa. Is that because
um,
it's landlocked, so it just takes more shipment and handoff between different modes of transportation?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, and being, I know you've got some experience on the trucking side, but
Mhm.
you think about what was going on during COVID, right? A lot of people were laying people off, and where people were not coming into the office, they weren't working. So if you think about a manufacturer, or let's say a distribution center, is the easiest thing to think about. A distribution center that is getting 50 trucks a day in, and they don't have enough labor to unload them. But instead of
Okay.
saying 50 trucks, let's talk about 50 containers. Well,
Wow.
50 containers, when they don't have enough labor to unload them, and all those containers are now sitting on a chassis. Well, the chassis supply and the container supply are not unlimited, right? There's a limited number of equipment available. So
There was a story
now,
in Los Angeles specifically. I remember hearing about that they were just getting stacked higher and higher because there was
yeah,
nobody to come get the containers.
yeah. Well, and so when you think about, again, Chicago or places like Dallas or other landlocked, rail yards, to where you have that distribution center that's supposed to be receiving and unloading those containers and then turning them back around, and so they can go back into the storage yard and the chassis can be reused. Well, now all of a sudden you've got more containers that are coming into Dallas, but there's no chassis to deliver them because they're sitting with full containers out at the distributor's yard. So now the rail yards are getting backed up, and then ultimately the rail yards are at capacity because they can't move, they can't take anymore. So then what happens is that the rail won't take any more, let's say out of Los Angeles coming to Dallas, because Dallas doesn't have the capacity for them. So now they're being built up and increasing storage and being held in Los Angeles. So ultimately, what ended up happening was the vessels have to stay and just not unload because there's no capacity at the ports to even take the containers off. Right. So, it all kind of went down to this issue to where, there just was not enough labor to unload those containers and then turn those chassis and turn those containers back around. Um, we didn't see at that time price increases, let's say on the Atlantic side, like we did on the Trans-Pacific side, just because of the volume that was coming in. The Atlantic stayed down fairly low for quite a while. Ultimately, what did ended up happening was, as many of the suppliers and steamship lines started looking to other ports to go back in and being able to unload those containers. So instead of just unloading in Los Angeles or some West Coast point, They may do a canal sailing, and they may come up to Houston or Mobile or now all of a sudden Savannah. Well, what ended up happening? Same thing ended up happening. Now those ports started becoming more and more congested, and then you started to see the rates starting to rise on the transatlantic. And interestingly enough, the Trans-Pacific rates have decreased quite a bit, and at a faster rate now than the transatlantic rates are decreasing. It's better, but it's still
Hmm.
not back to, let's say, pre-COVID era.
Right.
But whereas again, a year and a half ago, somebody might be paying $20,000 for a container to get into Dallas. That's it's a third of that.
Wow. So it's, as far as just the American economy goes, that's okay news, I guess. At least it's going the right direction, right? Because
Right.
it's, I mean, would you say it's better for the economy if those rates are lower, right? So that kind of things are flowing in more easily, or how does that affect things?
No, well, it does, right? Because I mean, you think about the fact that all of that cost has to be passed down to somebody, right? And there's
Gotcha.
nobody, there's no steamship line that's going to go back in that's going to eat that cost. Guys like us who we're still small, we're paying the steamship line a certain amount of money. We're contracting, these services out, and we have to do, let's say, a cost plus basis. So I can't go back in and say, well, your cost was $3,000. It's now $5,000, but it's okay. I'll eat the extra $2,000 because we don't have that kind of money in it.
Right.
So ultimately, those prices get passed down to the importer, and then the importer, of course, is passing those prices back along to the end user, right?
Yeah.
So, and if
Is
you
that
think about it, there's only a certain cost. I mean, there's only so much that you can stick inside of a container, and that price per unit, gets passed along. I mean, why is the price, of toilet paper still high? Because at some
right?
point somebody figured out that they could increase that price and somebody would pay it, and it still hasn't gone down yet. So some of that is shame on those manufacturers because they
Mhm.
haven't passed the savings back to the consumer.
But some of it's just the hard cost they have on just getting the stuff here has gone up, and so for some of the, but you're saying they haven't brought it down in proportion in some
Right,
cases, probably with
right,
how the rates have fallen.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's a supply and demand. I think once they figured out that people were willing to pay, so much for a roll of toilet paper,
Right.
they've just left the prices there. Now I think that there's some that have maybe decreased the prices a little bit, right? But I don't think that they've gone through and they've caught up with the rates of, let's call it the landed cost, right? Because the cost of the material plus the cost of the transportation, that's the landed cost of the material. So the landed cost is a lot cheaper today than it was a year and a half ago, both on imports and export sides. And plus, the issues again with storage. I mean, the storage charges were just absolutely killing, a lot of those manufacturers. And I think, what they may be doing is they're trying to recoup some of the losses that they had to suffer through those
Gotcha.
periods. So,
That makes
yeah.
sense. All right. So you talked about how you started the current company, Central Cargo North America. Let's get into a little more about those first customers. So in this case, it's like the strategic partnership you had with the headquarters in Italy. They had
Yeah.
customers kind of just waiting, and it sounds like, to use their North America operation. So that's like the strategic design of that whole relationship just sets you up to have customers. It sounded like, is that right?
Yeah, we started. I mean, again, we started with it's funny, the first month, in doing the operations, it was very, very slow. And I think we did $654 in business the first month, but that was because, I mean, we were trying to get the computer system set up. We were still getting our licenses finalized. We were still getting these things. And so, we weren't actively going out and chasing our own customers that we knew at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We were handling some business, and we were specifically and purposely, making it go slow because we wanted to make sure that if we brought anybody on and we did anything, that we were going to be handling it well. Again, I think going back to that same conversation about the user experience, what we focused on since day one is the user experience. And we've called it just, we're a service oriented company. We're service first. But it is that user experience because we want to know that if we are bringing a customer on and they're going to engage with us, that they are going to have the best experience that they've ever had, and they're going to want to continue to do more business with us. We don't want to set ourselves up for failure by trying to take more business on than we can support.
That's
And it is
interesting.
a commitment that we make to generally everybody that we're doing business with and everybody that we've brought on, whether that's our employees or whether that's our customer partners or whether it's our agent partners. On the back of our card, we have this little tagline that says, "You'll love what we do."
Mm,
And to that point, that's exactly the way we try to approach every interaction. If we hire an employee and we bring them on as a partner and a team member with us, then we want them to love the way that we're treating them. If it's a customer, then we want them to love how we're taking care of them and looking out for them. If it's a partner, it's the same thing. I mean, we look at those international partnerships where we have in the UK or China the same as we would a customer down the street. Um, we're making a promise and a commitment to them.
yeah.
So as we gained some of that original business when we first came in, again, it was very purposeful in the way that we went out after business. So we said, okay, we've got these customers, let's start handling those. And then we would look at it and say, okay, we're getting to the point to where we might be a little overwhelmed, so we need to hire ahead of the curve. We need to be hiring people
Okay.
before we need that person because we've got a commitment that we've made and we've made a promise.
Okay, that's what I was
Um,
going to ask you about, that little note that you said not to take on too much to where it deteriorates your quality of service. And I
right.
was wondering if you could talk a little more about that specific angle, like because what I see in the businesses I'm involved with, like that's kind of a balance. You want to be aggressively go after sales and drive revenue and all that, but at the same time, there's that other side of the pendulum there where okay, we got to be able to serve all these new sales and
Yeah.
actually you know follow through with all the things that the salespeople just sold. And yeah, that's an interesting problem I think that all business owners face. So if you could talk a little bit about that balance.
It is, and I mean, if you look at any business, I mean, your payroll is going to be, the majority of your expenses every month. At least in ours. Um, but we really are looking at it because it's like we can't afford to lose the opportunity. And again, we look at it with one thing in mind is that every first opportunity with a customer could be our last opportunity with that customer, and every opportunity with a customer should be treated as a first opportunity with a customer. So when we get on the phone with them or we have an engagement with them by email, and again, I hate to keep using and stealing somebody else's comment, but we want that best user experience for that customer because we know that one chance might lead to 10 chances, and 10 chances might lead to 100 chances. And I'm also a big believer in referrals, and I think that as long as you go back in and you treat the people that you're doing business with right, then you'll also get referrals to other opportunities and other customers. And so we always look at it like, hey, we don't just want that business, we want that referral business too. We want to find out who else that they work with. We want to look for any other opportunity that we can try to capture, and as long as we're treating them the way that we want to be treated, then we'll make sure that we're gathering those. And we do a fairly good job of going after, any opportunity that comes our way with, for example, if we have a shipment coming in from Italy that's coming into to Chicago, even we may not be physically in Chicago right at the moment. We have offices in Dallas and in Seattle. Even if we're not physically in Chicago, we can make sure that we're treating that particular customer in Chicago, as great as we possibly can. So just so that we can see what else maybe they have. Maybe they've got business that goes from Chicago to Brazil. And that's an opportunity for us. So, we want to try to pick up those opportunities anywhere we can.
Okay, so customer service again being closely tied to sales because that builds your reputation, builds the relationship, so you can go
Yeah.
deeper into that client's potential sales. But when it comes to referrals to other businesses, do you outright ask the current clients like, "Hey, is there anybody else we can do business for?" Is there like a intentional way that you have or a process you have for asking for referrals?
Yeah, within a manufacturer for our side of the business, there's always internal clients as well as external clients because we may be working with the logistics manager, and there may be a sales manager that's in charge of a lot of trade shows. And because of that, so he might be the guy that's responsible to move all their trade show booths. He might be the guy that's responsible to get all of the material to that trade show. And so he might be somebody that's contracting with, another freight forwarder. So, we would ask for referrals internally first. Do you have, is anybody else that's in charge of freight or logistics within the organization? A sales manager, maybe a purchasing manager, sometimes a manufacturer, the maintenance guy might be in charge of something. If a line breaks and all of a sudden they've got to get an urgent part in, is the person that's in charge of the maintenance, does he make the decisions on getting those parts to him? So there's plenty of opportunities internally within an organization that we would branch out to. And we always look again at those referrals, because if we know that we're working with that manufacturer and they're sending business to another company, or maybe what they have is they've got business that is controlled by another party but comes out of their facility, then we would ask for a referral for that business as well. So, again, for an example, if that person was bringing business in from Italy, but they have a customer in Brazil, but the person in Brazil is in charge of the logistics for that lane. The guy in Chicago may not have any say over who's used, but the person in Brazil does. So we would ask for an opportunity to have the conversation with the person in Brazil, or an introduction. And I do the same thing on the outside. I mean, I constantly, refer people that I work with to other people that I work with, because, again, this book called Referral of a Lifetime by Bob Berg, I think is absolutely brilliant. And it's something that I've really tried to do over the course of my career, because I think as long as you're connecting people, it comes back to you.
Yeah, even when talking to you about being on the podcast, you immediately were like, "Hey, here's two other people I think you should get on there." Like it was like just a natural part of your conversation.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just started the book called Super Connectors or Super
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like it's touching on that same kind of a thing, like being the person that helps connect people or refer people together.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so the target audience or the target customer, I guess, for a freight forwarding company, it sounds like like logistic manager. Is that kind of the role at organizations that your target customer is?
Yeah, you would call, I mean, those titles might be logistics managers. It might be the traffic manager. It might be the shipping manager, the receiving manager. Again, we would look at and we would say, okay, sales manager, if he controls, the movement of trade shows, then those would be people that we talk to. Sometimes it's the purchasing managers that make those decisions, because
Okay.
they might purchase logistics services the same as they might purchase product. So there's many different people that somehow can be, engaged in that conversation. Even getting down to, let's say, the chief financial officer, because if a company is going back in and they're trying to take a really hard look at how much they spent on transportation, then that might be the person that we talk to, because we can go in and say, look, we can save you this amount of money. And maybe we're not talking about saving money. Maybe we're talking about saving them time and energy,
Gotcha.
And that is money, right?
Yeah. Okay. And so the way that you guys help them save time or money is you've got all the relationships. Obviously you've got all these certifications that you had to go through the trouble of getting, and then all the relationships with the freight companies, or like the hauling companies, the trucking companies. And I guess does that include all modes of transportation? You guys are in touch with, or have relationships with every form of transportation across the whole
Yeah.
life cycle of a product getting from one place to another.
Yeah. I mean, it's whether it's ocean, whether it's air. I mean, we contract to the airlines, we contract to trucks. Whether it's sometimes it may be something as small as a cube van, because we're running a hot shot and somebody's got one pallet that they've got to send from one place to another, right? So we might do something that small. We might do something as large as a full truckload. So it just depends.
Okay. Well, this has been really interesting. Do you have time for a few rapid fire questions about some tactics that you may or may not have used?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So this is kind of an audit about your sales funnel or your marketing funnel. And we start off with traditional marketing, and I'll just go down the list, and you can say yes or no or give more details as we talk about different tactics. All right, we'll start off with traditional marketing and different direct marketing tactics. Face-to-face meetings, cold calls, or cold physical mail.
No, face-to-face meetings. No.
Okay. And you don't do any cold calling anymore? Because I know you said earlier in your career you did, but is that
No, I would say we do warm calling.
okay?
Yeah, no cold calling really. We do a lot of warm calling.
And is that through like a referral, some kind of
Yeah.
introduction? Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, I know you're on to the rapid fires, but again,
Yeah.
if we've got something that's coming in, we have a constant source of leads that are coming to us because their shipments coming in into the country or going out of the country with people we may or may not have ever worked with in the past. So those are all the warm leads that we have a constant
Yeah.
source of leads. So.
Okay. Different forms of print media, newspaper ads, magazine ads, bulletin boards. It doesn't seem like it.
No, and I think in our business, no bulletin boards, no like newspaper ads, media magazines. There's still a lot of organizations, a lot of verticals that still use a lot of
Mhm.
magazines, whether that's electronic versions or whether it's still printed. Some of those are of interest, right? Let's say pharmaceutical journals or something like that, or you may have aircraft manufacturers or parts manufacturers for aircrafts. Advertising for logistic services is certainly a good way to go after and have people see your name.
Okay. What about different broadcast media like TV or radio?
I've never done that any time in my
Okay.
career. No.
Okay. Um, Sales promotions like loyalty cards or loyalty programs or any kind of, it doesn't make sense for your company, I don't think, but any kind of physical discount cards.
No, we've tried that in the past, and it just never
Really?
seemed to really get anything out of it. At one of the previous companies, we might go and give the customer, $50 gift card for a
Got you.
future shipment, and then they're like, okay, well, it went over like a lead balloon.
Gotcha. Because what's like the average cost of shipping something?
No, I mean, man, it just depends on where you're talking about. I mean, domestically, it can, if I'm shipping a box or if I'm shipping a truck, right, there's going to be a vast difference in the price.
Gotcha.
And excuse me, internationally, it's the same way. So
Gotcha.
it's you can't really say what that is, right?
I see. All right, moving on to digital marketing tactics. Um, I saw that you guys have a website. Do you guys actively like put content out there, going after your target audience, whatever, like in a blog or something like that?
No, we want to. I really want to get more involved with that, and get more information out, especially when you start talking about things like white papers or
Right.
case studies. We're just too small right at the moment to be
Yeah.
doing it. But I would love to be more engaged in doing that. I mean, we do use LinkedIn quite a bit. We post there quite a bit. We try to engage, but for the most part, I don't think that we're gaining any new business opportunities there. I think the only thing that allows us to do is to be able to validate some of what we say, to people that
Yeah.
do want to work with us. It's not necessarily gaining us any new opportunities.
I think that you guys could be sitting on an opportunity there with your perspective on the supply chain. I know that's been a hotter topic these past few
Yeah,
years. So it seems like you've got a well of information or some way of, pulling together stats or your expertise
yeah.
to kind of fuel your content there. So you said you use LinkedIn. Any other social channels? Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok?
Uh, no, and probably only because of the fact that I'm rarely on Facebook. I rarely post on Facebook. I don't tweet. I can't say I don't. I did, and it was too time consuming, and I'm just too busy. So I've
Yeah.
really cut back on that. YouTube again. If we could go back in and get the right content done, and really find something that I think is of value, of course, YouTube, having a YouTube channel for the company, would be a great opportunity for us. And of course, that's something that, would then be able to tie back into our own webpage and do
Right.
that too. So I do think that there is value in social media. The problem with it is that when, I'm the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the janitor, and everything else, because we've got basically 10 people in our organization, so we're all engaged in a lot of different things, right? So
Right. So on the paid advertising side of things, do you do any paid advertising? And if you do you do any advertising like in Google search or any of the social channels?
no, we haven't. No,
Okay. Do you do any paid advertising at all? Of
no,
any? None.
no.
So it's just pure relationships and following up with referrals.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, maybe there is a way for us to do it, and
Mhm.
and I'll admit I don't know it, right? So
Right.
if it's a way for a freight forwarder to go out and get do some paid advertising that's going to increase our business, then
Yeah.
I'm not aware of it, right? So
Gotcha.
it may just be that I just don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess if there's like logistics managers or purchase managers, if they are actively searching for freight forwarders or something like that, you could probably do a little Google research and see how much volume there is for those types of searches just to see if it'd be worth throwing some ad dollars towards
Right.
showing up in search for those kind of things.
Yep.
All right. So, okay, not doing any advertising right now or posting much content yet on your site. So that takes some of those other questions off. Um, if you would talk a little bit about the maybe some sales tools, if any, that you guys use, like do you use a CRM or any like other prospecting tools or anything like that?
When we first started, we had just set up. I mean, HubSpot. I think
Okay.
it's actually a great tool, but one of the new ERP system that we're going to be using and we're switching over to has an internal CRM built into it. And we
Okay.
do like using the the built-in system, because then it's easy to go back in, and when there's an opportunity that is captured, it's easy just to transition the data. Um, so that's already there. Um, HubSpot, I do think, has a lot of really, really great tools that are built into it, especially because of the marketing tools that are already built into it as well. So,
Right.
I mean, free plug for them if anybody is looking to use it. HubSpot's fantastic.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of marketing stuff, a lot of doing that. I mean, that's something else that we've also got to spend some time and energy into
Yeah.
growing and doing. We right now we get swag, right, and we give that out to people. So
Okay.
that's one of the things I think that it's about as far as we're going with the marketing. We want to put things in front of people that they actually
Yeah.
want. Instead of buying pens, or will end up in a drawer or in a cup. We try to buy things that people will use and they'll hang on to for a while. Such as a Yeti cooler or something like that.
Right. I just added that to my list. I forgot to ask people about that. Using like swag or business, what do they call it? Like, I guess business promotional materials,
Yeah,
like that.
advertising and marketing. That's part of what we're doing in there. But yeah, our promotional materials.
Okay.
And the other thing we do a lot of, like with doing that, is calendars. And I think because there's these nice 3 month at a glance sort of wall calendars that we like to use, and so we do those, and those are things that you get your name and your brand in front of somebody for a whole year, and people like the fact that they can see a month behind, a month ahead in the current month. So those calendars always seem to be a great success.
Huh. Wow. Did not expect that. Calendars. All right. I'm adding
Yeah.
that to my list to ask people in the future. Um, if it's not too sensitive, what ERP is it that has the like CRM stuff built into it?
This particular one is one called CargoWise,
Huh.
and it's one that's used by. I mean, this particular operations platform is one that's used by a lot of the forwarders throughout the world. So it's very, very. It's been around for a long time, and it's got a lot of use. And honestly, one of the things is that's what's great about that system, is because so many people use it. It's, if you have a customer that comes to you from another organization or a competitor, and you ended up hiring them, then the chances are pretty great they probably used CargoWise at some point in time. So it makes a transition, fairly easy.
Hmm. Okay, cool. Let's see. Um, do you use any like reputation management type sites or like reviews or like any ways of collecting testimonies from customers?
No, no. It's something that we want to and should be doing better of. But we try to do and think about that even through my career. We've always thought about being very cautious about some of that because
Okay.
you want the testimony, but you also want to be sure that you're not going to end up putting 1,000 other freight forwarders on the heels of one of your better customers, right? So
Right. So
um,
is it pretty competitive? Like how competitive is the freight forwarding industry?
I mean, there's thousands of us, so it's not like that
Just in the
you're
US.
a manufacturer of something very unique and there's only like
Right.
your RV guy with the boot things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people there are out there that make those? I don't know, but for
Yeah. Not
us,
many.
even in a city like Dallas, there's probably I don't know, there's probably several hundred freight forwarders. In some cities like Miami and L.A., New York, there's a over 1,000.
The port type cities, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, you're not wanting to give out your client list necessarily in any form. That have to be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do the, they'll do the white papers, or they'll do the case studies, and they do talk about their customers. I think, for one, you've got to know know that, what you're doing and what you're providing is something that's going to be so unique that you can then use that material to gain additional opportunities, because there is some risk factor anytime that you do that. Now, I may have such a good relationship with my contact at that customer that that I'm not really worried about that. But at some point in time, let's say my contact leaves and he goes somewhere else. Well, now that particular customer could be opened up to intrusion, let's say,
Mhm.
by other forwarders. I mean, it's going to happen. We know that we know there's a limited number of suppliers and there's a lot of freight forwarders around, and every day of the week there's somebody else in the door trying to get the same business that we're trying to get.
Right.
That's why service is so critical to what we do, and I'd say it's even more so than rates, because while everybody wants the best rate and they want the best service, you know if you give them a rate that's pretty close to what they're getting, and you give them a service that's 10 times better, then sometimes they might be okay. I'll eat the extra $50. It's worth it because your service is
Right.
saving me time.
Right. Is there anything you would do differently about how you launched this your current business?
uh I don't know that I would do it differently. um You know, because I think things are going really well. I
Yeah.
think every day there's probably, one thing here or there that we may do a little differently. But, overall, I mean, we opened in Seattle because I was already there. We purposefully wanted to set the headquarters up in Dallas, because we wanted to be centrally located in the U.S. So the intention was always to do that, and we did it in the time frame that I think was right. We found some of the right people. Well, not some of the right people. We found all of the right people, and we look at every person again that we bring on as a team, as a partner in the business, and all of these people know that they're here. Sort of like a startup, right? They're going to be here
Yeah.
from the beginning, and they're going to move forward with the company as it grows. So I think we've done everything the way we should have so far.
And do you think that's because of your years of experience, like going through multiple businesses to where you kind of had the formula just from all the past experiences you've had that you kind of knew what you were doing? You've been in this business before, like this specific, almost exact business before, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the time I've been doing this on the commercial side of what I've been doing it for over 30 years now, and counting even the time I did logistics in the Air Force, which was really being, contracting some of those movements out to people like me, but sort of in the logistics business now for 37 years. So, and knowing some of the markets and having been around, I mean, and knowing, a lot of the customers, and I can't say that I had some insight and we had some genius stroke of luck. I think that we just happened to be very thoughtful, and I spent a lot of time planning and pre-planning before we ever opened the door and took the first shipment.
Mm.
So we were getting the licenses set up ahead of time before we ever actually started moving business. I had a lot of time to pre-plan and get everything sort of laid out on a time frame and a schedule and when what needed to happen, and that came from the years of knowledge in the business and knowing
Right.
how those things had to work. But it just so happened that I had time between we signed a contract to start the company and time that we actually started moving freight. So there were several months that I could spend all of my days planning for the future of the company.
So how long was it? It was a couple of months, you said, or how long was it before when you started the company before you got your first customer?
Now, we made the agreement in March of 2019 that we were going to start Central Cargo North America. The filings of everything for the business, that finally happened on April 19th of 2021. And we handled the first shipment in August of 2021. So between March and between August was really the pre-planning period, because it was, we knew we had to get the business licenses started. We knew we had to get, all of the local licenses for Washington done. We had to get our FMC licenses in place, our DOT registrations and licenses. So all of that stuff was being done before we could ever start moving business in the first place. So, we knew that there was a time frame for all those things to happen.
So anybody listening who's like, "Oh man, they're killing it," and they're not even like pushing hard on the digital marketing side or whatever, I'm gonna start my own freight forwarding business real quick and make millions in months.
Yeah, no, don't. I'm only 22 years old. I mean, look how bad I look.
So it takes some time to get one of these kinds of businesses started to be able to do freight forwarding for international multimodal shipments.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that start freight forwarding businesses every day that don't make it,
Yeah,
and like any business, I mean, it is risky. It is a very, personnel heavy type of a business also. I mean, there's ways as you grow to continue to try to go back in and reduce the amount of labor that you're pushing into it, but very early on, it is very labor intensive, as well as costly. I mean, you have to go back out and to get your Federal Maritime Commission license, you've got to go back in and post bonds, right? I mean, and your bonds, you have to post a $75,000 bond.
whoa,
Your DOT, you've got to have a $50,000 bond. These things all cost money.
and that's just
And
cash
those
you
are,
have to put up.
no, you go through a bond company, right? But you still got
Okay,
to pay the bond company a certain amount of money,
gotcha.
and even still, those are things that you're paying out before you're ever moving anything.
Right.
And then you got to have cargo insurance. You've got all of these things. So
Wow.
there is a lot of licenses and a lot of fees that you have to have in place and constantly maintain.
Awesome. Well, let's say that one of your target customers is listening right now, logistic manager, purchasing manager, whatever. Why don't you give them a quick little pitch on your business, and we'll close out the show with that. And you can tell them how to contact you guys, or kind of that quick sales pitch to your target customer.
Yeah, the thing, when we go back in and we look at it, what we're talking about always is, you want somebody that will treat you with fairness, treat you with respect, and will look out for your best interests. One of the things we always say again is you'll love what we do. So we try to mitigate that risk. We want that best user experience from the first moment forward. We don't want to have to put anyone in a position to where they feel like they are taking a risk by using someone like us. We want to be able to ensure that they know that we're going to be the one that's going to be looking out for them, and we're going to make them look good. And we always say, I don't want to make you look good. I want I want to make your customer look good too. So we want to make sure and we want to ensure that everybody loves what we do throughout the entire process. And in order to get hold of us, we do business again, all 50 states. We do business worldwide. We do transborder, air, ocean, full truckload, partial truckloads, LTL, hot shots. We do it all. You know, you can contact us at info@centralcargo-northamerica.com and website www.centralcargo-northamerica.com.
Awesome. And we'll also have those links in the show notes. Thanks, everybody listening. Sean, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, buddy.